All right, welcome into the Five Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick, the CEO of Five Reasons Sports. Make sure you catch all of our programming on the channel, turn on the notifications, like, subscribe, all that good stuff down here in South Florida. But we got a special guest today. You know him as Heisman Trophy winner 1998, also rushed for 1,853 yards. I remember every single one of them for the 2002 Miami Dolphins and retired with more than 10,000 yards rushing in the NFL. He's joining us now from Northern California. We're going to talk about something he's promoting down here in the state of Florida. Ricky Williams, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's start here before we get into your cause down here. Um, when you look back at your Dolphins tenure as a whole, how do you kind of sum it up for people?
That it was close. That it was close. It's kind of tragic. We had wonderful moments, wonderful years, wonderful games, but it was close. And it started off my first year, 2002, and at the end of the year, we go up to Foxborough to play the Patriots, and if we win that game, we're in the playoffs. Right? We had the NFL's leading rusher, and we had the sack champion in
Mhm.
JT, and I think it was 4 minutes and 13 seconds left, and we're up by 10 points. And somehow we end up like everything goes wrong and we lose that game. But I truly believe if that Dolphins team got into the playoffs, we had a shot to go all the way. So it was close. And then that following year, even though we won 10 games,
Mhm.
which usually in a 16-game season gets you into the playoffs, we missed the playoffs. It
Mhm.
was close. And then it was close to the beginning of the 2004 season, and the best player takes off.
I don't remember who that was. All right, you know what? Before you finish this, I just want to share an anecdote with you related to that. Well, two
Yeah.
anecdotes, okay? And then I want to ask you something specific to 2002. So going back to 2002, first thing, I know what happened because I was in Foxborough for those last 413, and I'm actually responsible for this, I think, because I'm kind of a jinx. And at halftime, I saw Rick Spielman on the food line, and I congratulated him for the trade he made with New Orleans to acquire you that got you guys into the playoffs. And all I can tell you is, as I walked down to interview everybody after the game, he cursed at me. Didn't say anything else, but he just cursed at me because obviously I was responsible for what happened at the end of the game. I remember all of it. I also remember Norv deciding to throw three times at the end of the game instead of handing the ball to you, and a kickoff that went out of bounds, a whole bunch of different things that happened there. And the 2004 anecdote is I will share this one. So after a certain player left the team, I don't know who that was. I was actually in the coach's office to do an interview with him, Mr. Wanstadt, after that. And I walked in, and the very first thing I noticed was when you got into the room, he had a picture of the two of you with like his arm around you, and it was turned upside down. And at that point, I realized this season's not going to go very well, no matter what it is that he told me. So I'm very familiar with that entire situation. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's kind of the whole career. And then the one that's to me the most tragic, you know, is, if I would have been a Dolphin for one more year,
Mm.
I would have eclipsed Larry Zonka's all-time Dolphin rushing record. Close, right? I think it was 400,
Mhm.
444 yards short. Um, so
D-
just close,
Ricky, do
close.
those things matter more to you in retrospect in retirement than maybe they did at the time?
It mattered at the time, just because I had come back from my retirement, and it's getting close to 10,000 yards career rushing, and I just feel like it would have made everything okay, right? To
Mm.
have 10,000 yards rushing and be the all-time Dolphins leading rusher, but it was close. It's close.
I gotcha. Before we get again to what you're doing, you mentioned 2002, so I just want to bring this up. What I remember most about 2002, other than you having 1,853 yards and JT having 18 and a half sacks and everything else that went on with that team, was there were a lot of expectations for that team. And you guys go into Denver and you win a nationally televised game. I think it was a Sunday night. You win it 24-22 on Alindo's field goal. And I just remember going downstairs, and there's Chambers, who had been knocked out by Kanoy Kennedy, and there's Aronde Gadsden, who'd hurt his thumb, and there's Jay going into the training room, and I believe he had a hand injury as well. And you guys were 5-1 at the time. You were you looked like the best team in the league, honestly. And then Jay misses 6 games. You guys go 2-4, and that kind of set up what happened at the end of the season. I mentioned that season before this season as my fear for the Dolphins, that if they had all these expectations, really talented roster, but if Tua missed 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, they were not prepared to handle that. What does it feel like for a team when your starter, even if he's not an elite guy, but if your starter goes down in that situation, when you feel you have a team that can win?
It depends on who's behind them. You know,
Mm.
there's some teams that spend a lot of money on having a number two guy that it's not too much of a drop off, that can still keep the guys confident. But confidence is everything, and I think the most important player to have confidence in is the quarterback. So as a new quarterback, is like earn the guy's confidence as soon as possible, and you got a shot.
Well, hopefully they can. Hopefully they won't go because I know they went 2-4 during that stretch and ended up not getting back there. I want to get back to this because we talk about your career ending with 10,000 yards. If the rules had been different in the NFL, and I think if society had been different 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you probably would have had 15,000 yards or something along those lines. Can you speak to the way that perceptions about cannabis have changed over the last 2 decades?
Yeah, they've changed a lot, and It's happened pretty quickly. Um, you know, like now, like, if someone gets suspended or gets in trouble for cannabis, it's kind of like general sentiment is that's dumb. You know, we need to change these laws. But back when I got in trouble, it was kind of the opposite. You know, it was like throw the kitchen sink at them. How could someone do something so dumb and throw everything away? Um, you know, and I think just in general in sports, right? Like you can pay college players, you can bet on games. You know, it's, it's like you know, going back to when I got drafted in '99. If someone would have told me that, oh, this would be, I'd be like, no way, no, not in 20 years. But here we are.
Well, now to this point, I mean, you can pretty much bet on how much players will get on NIL. Like there is every while you're smoking while you're doing it. Like literally every
Legally, right? Yeah.
legally everything is legal. All the rules are got. Well, okay, well, NIL specifically, like if you had been in that era, we saw what happened to Reggie Bush, right? And I know as part of the Heisman community, you're familiar with everything. Johnny Manziel stepping out and being a part of that cause for him to get his trophy back. I mean, perceptions of that have changed 180.
Yeah, it's just weird how much power we give to the people in charge, to the
Mm,
governing bodies, you know? And I understand why we have to, but we can start to see now as times change, you know, it puts
mm.
us in a weird situation. Like, do we say that everything that happened before then is bad? Like, how do we handle the people that were punished who wouldn't be punished today? It's tricky, you know, it's tricky. But to me, the lesson is people just have to speak up for the
Mm.
things that are important to them and not be afraid.
Want to speak specifically to the amendment that you're supporting in the state of Florida. We know Florida is an interesting state politically. It's kind of divided into two parts. I would say the further south that you go, the further north that you are, and the reverse in terms of where people lean. But it does seem like the amendment has a significant amount of support at the moment. Could you kind of speak to how you got involved with this, what the benefits are for it, and um, where you think we may head in November?
Yeah, you know, I first became involved a few years back when the last amendment failed in Florida. It shocked a lot of people. And you know, because of my cannabis advocacy, I've been leaning more and more into politics because there's finally an issue that I'm passionate about. And because so much of me getting in trouble for cannabis happened in Florida, it's really near and dear to my heart. And you know, at first it was about, you know, people shouldn't get in trouble, but the medical side and
Mm,
realizing how many people, you know, are being helped, it's just amazing. And this, to me, the biggest thing about the amendment is just giving greater access to more people. And there's so many cool things I get to talk about through cannabis. And one of the things in this amendment and what we've seen in multiple states that have allowed for recreational cannabis is the tax revenue.
mm.
And you know, conservative numbers right now in the state of Florida are saying, you know, over $200 million a year in tax revenue from recreational cannabis sales. And and I think because there's so many examples of other states being able to do this, that it's the perfect time for for it to enter Florida.
So, how will your advocacy sort of show itself over the next? We've got, I mean, we're talking now sort of towards the end of September, 5 or 6 weeks, obviously, before things finish up. How do you plan specifically, other than kind of sharing the cause, to a certain degree on interviews like this? How do you plan? Do you plan to make a trip down to the state of Florida? What's your intention there?
Yeah, I'll be in Florida next month for a week, and we're gonna visit a bunch of dispensaries and events and get the word out. And at this point, it it's really about getting people out to vote.
Mhm.
That's really the push, because we can sit in our homes and throw popcorn at the TV and be upset because things aren't changing. But what got me passionate about this, it's finally something that's affected me personally and
Mhm.
has affected a lot of people. I think of all the minorities that have been arrested for having a roach in their car,
Mhm.
and how cannabis laws have been weaponized against people of color. And we have the opportunity to show up and do something to change that forever, you know? And to me, it's like, I get it, but this is a momentous time in our history, right? We're going to look back in 20 and 30 years and laugh that cannabis was illegal and feel proud that we did something to change it. And that's my message. And that's my
Mhm.
own personal feel and why I'm out here having these conversations. And I know tons of people who have been negatively affected by cannabis. And so I'm trying to reach those people to help them realize that they can do something about it.
What are the questions that people ask you? What are the people who may be on the fence about an amendment like this? Like, what would be their concerns?
Honestly, when I meet people, they're so excited to meet me. If they have
Mhm.
concerns, they're not sharing them with me.
Mhm.
It's kind of like preaching. It's kind of like preaching to the choir. But
Mhm.
in general, in my advocacy work, the biggest oppositions um come from like what's called family values.
Mhm.
The family value section, and we can understand family values, right? We all grew up with this. The parent finding the bag of weed in the kid's dresser drawer, and the kid gets grounded, right? And the idea that drugs are bad. I completely understand that, but I think what they're not seeing is that the conversation and what we know about cannabis has changed. And for
Mhm.
me, it's like the more we can talk about the positive benefits of cannabis, we don't have to worry about the negative effects of it. But if we're not talking about it and people just are finding out about it online or through their friends, then it becomes more of an issue. And there are plenty of benefits to cannabis that we now see. So we have ammunition to put out a positive, uplifting message to change the narrative.
I want to get to specifically the state of Florida now because I know California, the laws are more liberal in this area, but in Florida they have obviously added dispensaries. If you are checked and you have a medical reason that you can go to a dispensary, they're all over Broward County here. So again, for those who don't understand it, what would be the specific benefit? Like, why does more need to be done than that? In other words, making it legal for recreational use beyond what is currently available with your True Leaves, with your sunny sides, etc. What is the difference there?
Yeah, it's access, and it's
Mm,
easy for us to talk about. We have cars, we can get around. If there's a dispensary 20 minutes away, it's easy for us. It's easy for us to get there. Or right, the expense of getting the medical recommendation and finding a doctor. Now the state has to know who I am and track,
mm,
right? So access just isn't easy, you know and I have a cannabis brand and I'm doing business in Florida, so I can speak from the business side of it. it's
mm.
it's really complicated, and it's complicated in the way they're doing it. It's so competitive, and so there's just so many things that regulation can allow us to improve and address that we can't right now because it's too rigid. And so one thing is access, and
Mm.
two is opening up regulations to allow people to be more successful on the business side.
Do you think this time it passes?
I do. I do.
Okay.
I think just the nature of the conversation, right? Even we have, in the in the letter that we sent out, we have both sides are supporting conversations towards moving towards federal
Mm.
legalization, and so it's shifting. It's shifting, and I think the amount of money that's been put into helping this pass, um, I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if it didn't.
Well, it's the state of Florida. We've been shocked about things before, but hopefully not this time. Before we let you go, Ricky, again, appreciate you taking the time. I got to ask you. So, do you have how closely do you follow the sort of the Heisman race these days?
I follow it closely in the beginning of the year because it's easier. Yeah,
Okay, well, we've got a guy down here, the quarterback at University of Miami. He's had a pretty good start to the season. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to watch Cam Ward at this point.
I have. I have. Yeah. There's a couple of things, especially early in the season. I think late in
Mm,
the season, the numbers speak for themselves, but early in the season, you have an opportunity to get into the race. And I think the
mm,
University of Miami, although they haven't been the powerhouse that they used to be, it's still the University of Miami. And so someone makes big plays and shows up in Miami, they're going to be closer to the top. Same thing
mm,
in Texas,
mm.
crazy headlines about Arch Manning after one coming in late, being in the Heisman race. I'm like, get out of here. But hey, that's part of being in Texas. And I think the other thing about the Heisman Trophy is it's team success. It's
Mhm.
team success. If the team, right, or you got to be super good. You got to be like highlight reel. But I think if Miami continues to win, the Cam's got a real shot.
And the final thing here, for you personally, like you mentioned again, your decision, we joke about it, but in 2004 to leave, and I know you've said that was the best thing you needed for your career at that time. You ended up coming back and playing longer. But for you specifically as an athlete, and we all know Dave wasn't shy in terms of handing you the ball. Was it 6,000 times over 2 games and or 2 years in terms of the carries that he gave you? But for you,
Almost. Yeah.
pretty much for you, it was like, okay, no other ideas. Let's run Ricky left. Let's run Ricky right. Okay, there we go. Okay, want to know what I mean? And that's kind of the way things went for a couple of years. Um, but for you personally, what were the benefits at that time in your life as an athlete?
Of getting the ball so much.
No, of having cannabis as an outlet, even though it was not
Oh,
as
oh,
even though it was not it was not as accepted at that time. Like, why did you
yeah.
feel you wanted it in your life at that stage when you had something to
Um,
lose?
Well, because a couple of things. One is the physical stuff.
Mm,
Is to the way that I ran the ball. I was either popping pills or I was consuming cannabis, and I
mm,
liked the cannabis better because instead of popping pills and numbing myself, when I'd
mm,
smoke, I'd get on the ground and I'd stretch and I'd move, and it was just more holistic and embodied form of self care. But also, it's like playing football is mentally stressful.
mm,
You see it by now with social media, I can't even imagine, but people have all these comments about your performance. And if you can't keep your mind clear of all that stuff, it can bog you down and it can drain you. And so I
mm.
just remember after work, going home and smoking and allowing my body to relax, but also allowing my mind to relax and watching film and visualizing myself making plays, So it was really part of my self-care routine. And it worked because every morning I woke up ready to go to work and work my butt off.
One of the things I don't really understand about this debate, just personally, is that I don't understand why it was more socially acceptable to pop pills at that point, which obviously we know that athletes have to do to get through it, to get through the pain. And I think obviously, well, seems like the long-term effects of that would be much more significant than the long-term effects of turning to cannabis at that point. All right, Ricky, we really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for joining us again. We're in 10,000 yards in the NFL. Important cause. Now, anything that you like to say before we close?
No, this was fun.
Okay.
But it's just great. But to me, the beauty of all of it is that I get to have these conversations. I
Mhm.
get to use what happened, retiring and getting suspended. And now we can laugh at it, and I get to use that as a reason to advocate for helping more people feel better and improve the quality of their life. So it's a cool story, and I thank you for having me on to talk about this.
No, I appreciate it. It's a lot better to be laughing about it than what was going on at the time. I remember, I was at Las Olas with a friend of mine, and we saw it across the board. Dan Levitard is reporting, or something along those lines, that and we're like, wait a second, it was like 1 in the morning, and we're like, we got to get out of the bar. Those are interesting times in South Florida, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, the picture being turned over, I'll never forget that. When I saw that, I was like, okay, this team is going 4-12 this year, and they went 4-12 that year. So, but everything worked out. Dave's on TV, and you're promoting a great cause here. Ricky, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.